NDC. National organizer of the governing NPP, Sammi Awuku, has described the street protest by the opposition NDC over the outcome of the 2020 December 7 polls as dangerous to the country's democracy. Mr. Awuku impressed upon former President Mahama to emulate the actions of President Akufo-Addo after he lost the elections in 2012. He also believes the conduct of the NDC may open the floodgates for parties in future to resort to violence in the wake of electoral defeat. Sammi Awuku has been speaking to my colleague MFA Pau in the first part of an exclusive interview we had with him. Today we have the rare opportunity to sit with the national organizer of the New Patriotic Party, Mr. Sammi Awuku. After the election, we haven't had any interaction with him just yet, and we have that opportunity to do so today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, MFA. Thank you, and good to see you and the team from Multimedia.
Well, there's been a lot of allegations against the multimedia.
You always take the high with the low.
Okay, so I'm sure it's a good opportunity to clear that.
You have lots of accolades.
What are the accolades?
Including regime changes and the call election, mafias and all that. But the good news is that they are still multimedia.
And you can't do without us. But there were allegations that we're getting our figures from the NPP. Were you in any way providing figures to the media? Because for multimedia, there was no way.
I don't think we provided figures to multimedia and the general media fraternity. You guys also had a pool of observers and watchers, monitors at the various constituencies and polling stations. You don't have the capacity to deploy 40,000 people, but I'm sure you co-hosted with your other partners and other sister stations.
At least we were all the constituency, 275 who were at all the collation centers.
And let me use this opportunity to say congrats for a good job done. Sometimes we disagree with your reportage, but that's the beauty of democracy.
I missed the boycott. It's been quite a rough year interacting with the NPP, for instance, because there's a lot of tag against the multimedia group, especially
I'm not too sure about
JoyNews.
lots of tag, but when we disagree with the content, the reportage, it's important that as a political party we also make our comments known.
I missed boycotts of our station and all.
When you disagree and when you think that you're also not having the needed attention. But the good news is that when we also complain as an important stakeholder, you are the fourth estate of the realm. We also happen to be a major stakeholder in our political process. And we judge all. And I think we came to a speedy resolution. It's not the first time that we've disagreed with the strategy of multimedia or any other media house. But when we believe that, we always sit down to have that meaningful conversation, what affects us, our concerns, and how, for you as a media outfit, can also help lessen our fears. We can't always agree with you. There are times that we've vehemently been opposed to the content of some of your reportage and the news. But I think that by and large, we've also had good cooperation. Getting to the last quarter, 6 months to the end of the year.
Okay. So, I'm sure that will still be.
And then there were times that if you listen to JoyNews, and let me also be fair and honest, you can have 3 or 4 news being rolled, and about 3 of them were against the government, and back to back.
How is that against the government when it is happening?
Negative reportage, negative, and it can't always be just like the Western media, always looking at the darker side of Africa. If you want to see good side of Africa, I'm sure you can. And if you also want to concentrate on the dark side, you can also see
it's very
like
clear.
The Bible as well.
It's evident that you can never please the Ghanaian politician. I'm sure politicians everywhere.
Not the Ghanaian politician,
because interacting with the NDC, you get the same impression that
we don't speak for them.
I'm just saying that
we are crying our own cry.
As a media person, interacting with the NDC is the same vibe you get from them. That
they may have their own. They may have their own reservations. They may have their own issues when it comes to the content. But I think that there were times that we had cause to express our concerns, and we can't come and grab the microphone from the studios, but we also have to use our legitimate means to also disagree.
But you wish you could. You wish you could.
Not at all.
A few radio stations have been shut down under this government.
If it's a few radio stations, were they right or wrong, legit or not legit? Were they going according to the dictates of our laws? If you also scrutinize all these, and if you want to appeal to authorities to have a second look at these laws, but that was the law. So if Joy FM honors its obligations year in, year out, and you've also had media houses for a decade not honoring their statutory obligations or their obligations towards the state, I think that then that means you're going back to a system where you are picking and choosing. There were some radio stations who were pro the NPP who were also shut down. So regrettable, but I believe that they also helps us with an opportunity once again to make sure that we are always on the side of the law. Okay,
so let's talk about the just ended election. We'll get more into the media because there's a lot to talk about.
That's fine.
But it appears that after the election, the executives of the NPP, apart from a few press conferences that we've heard or we've covered, it appears you've all gone into hiding.
Oh, not at all. It was a hectic campaign. And after the campaign, there are things that we also needed to do behind the scenes to wrap up the campaign. Getting in touch with our regions, getting in touch with our constituencies, doing a post-mortem of the elections. And then also how to also get your supporters not to be provoked by the daily protest of the largest opposition party, who have clearly declared their intentions not to accept the verdict of the people and the results announced by the Electoral Commission. So behind the scenes, we've been working, the entire party leadership. We've been up and doing. We've been meeting behind the scenes. And as I speak to you, we are also planning our Thanksgiving service on Sunday, this coming Sunday.
Amidst the chaos, amidst the outright rejection of the results as declared by the Electoral Commission.
You had MFI, you had about 12 candidates going into the presidential elections, and you've had a greater majority of them accepting the verdict. They also had agents at the stations.
These are minority
but these are important stakeholders. They have equal vote. The vote of that LPG voter is the same as the vote of that NDC or NPP supporter on the day of elections.
They would say put all together, and it doesn't amount to anything when it comes up.
Democracy is also respecting the views of the few. So yes, you may consider them as very small parties, but they were on the ballot. And once they also fulfilled all their obligations to get on the ballot, you have to treat them with the same respect.
But of course, your main contender
the largest opposition party.
And if they have concerns about
the NDC, they've had concerns right from day one. First, and the flip-flop attitude of the largest opposition party gives me cause to worry. First, they were against the compilation of the new voters register. They said that it was going to lead to a spike in our COVID cases. And so the Ghanaian people shouldn't turn up to even register. Then it failed. Then they said it was too expensive an exercise for us to undertake. Back and forth, we believe that the cost of democracy is important than the cost of violence. In fact, it's more cheaper and far cheaper to have democracy and freedom than to have violence on our streets. We did go through the exercise successfully. The NDC's presidential candidate commended the registration process and said he was satisfied with the process. Then after the registration process, at every turn they had cause to worry, cause to complain. We participated fully in all IPAC meetings. There was some the NDC boycotted and went into the
they were unhappy with some of the processes at that IPAC
Well, but meeting. You cannot, if you're unhappy, you have to still be at the table to voice those concerns. You can't sit at home.
Your voice is not being heard.
But the very things that they raised, if they had raised it around the table, I'm sure those concerns would have been considered.
Because IPAC was packed with a number of people that, a number of parties, in fact, they were resurrected, such that They will always back.
Are you using Mr.
Mahama's
words?
What they have told us, what
Mr. Mahama said resurrected.
What the NDC has said is that
unless you are saying that the parties
so
that
they
the
can
NDC
support you
that
at the table.
Ekwadonko was there during Mahama's era and supported Mr. Mahama. Kofi Palu is not a new entrant now. He was part of the old process when Mr. Mahama was sitting president. And Henry Lati, was part of the old process when Mr. Mahama was presidential candidate and president at that time. Hassan Ayariga was one of the strongest allies of Mr. Mahama during the presidential debate. And then we had the Ayari Kofeno. So these people that I have mentioned, unless you are telling me that the NPP resurrected these personalities for the purposes of the 2020 elections. So they've been unfair with some of their criticisms. It's important that maybe they were with you in some time past. In terms of their position on issues now, they've shifted. So you have a problem with that. Then that means you're not speaking on a matter of principle. Ekwadonko was a thorn in our flesh during those days of Mr. Mahama. And Mr. Mahama at that time was very comfortable, even taking her to economic meetings at Senchi, to Europe, and all that to contribute towards the discourse. And that time she was used as even an attack dog on our presidential candidate. So if today the same person is saying that I think that I was wrong in the past, this government is doing well, even though we disagree with this government because we have our own party. You cannot say we resurrected such a person.
But for your own interest, for instance, when Mr. Mahama started raising concerns about not accepting results of a flawed election and raising the red flags about what is to come, like he, as he puts it. So in your interest,
what were the red flags? May I know?
Looked at it.
What were the red flags?
He mentions, for instance, at least not just him, the NDC mentions that
Mr. Mahama is the NDC.
The EC is conniving with the NPP
in terms of
to rig the elections that was coming up.
However, you know, it's a shame, and for me, my difficulty is in today's Ghana, I will be very surprised that the Electoral Commission leadership can sit at the Ridge headquarters and claim that they can rig elections for a political party. I'll be surprised. Many of the workers at the EC and the staff there were there from Afrajan's era. We weren't part of that recruitment process, and we've never been part of the EC's recruitment process. Through J. Kufuor's era. So from Rawlings's time through Kufuor's era, Mills, Mahama, Ekufuor, they've had a longer opportunity to be in government. They've had a longer opportunity to appoint electoral commissioners at the top. So in terms of administrative duties, it's the leadership of the EC that trickles down to do recruitment. So are they saying that the people appointed or recruited from Afrajan's era, throughout the Rawlings's time, throughout the Mills's era, and throughout his time, Mahama as president, were NPP staff, NPP appointees, or NPP recruits?
But you made new appointments.
We didn't. I'm saying we don't recruit. But if you are talking about we made new appointments at the top in consultation with the various authorities and bodies, unless someone is suggesting to me that Charlotte Osei was put there to do the bidding of Mr. Mahama, if that is considered a fair position, that is when then you can go on with further extrapolation.
But how she was removed is the concern that it appears that it was done such that you can bring in your own appointee for that same purpose.
With the greatest of respect, the EC commission, the commissioners at that time had their own internal problems. Government did not petition. The NPP did not file a petition to remove these EC bosses. But
these petitioners have been described as faceless. We are still yet to see one person.
But they exist. And some of them were staff from the EC. And again, if someone has a concern, the best place to resolve it and unmask these people, you can definitely have the law court. That of course, maybe you felt that I was given a raw deal, and the appropriate place to seek those redress would be the law court.
It appears that's the new chorus of the NPP, go to court.
Well, because our brothers enlightened us further.
They did?
Yes, they enlightened us further. That for every minute thing, they say that the NPP, we are the apostles of democracy. So they cannot see the reason why we shy away from the court. When we had not even shied away, they said we should proceed to court. Even when you cough, when we had issues that we expressed from the time of Madame Osei, and I'll give you a typical example. You had a system where we had gone to court in 2012. In fact, after the 2012 elections, the NPP felt within our bones that we won that elections. We felt. Subsequently, we audited our pink sheet. For us, we had the preponderance of evidence for us as a party. But we cannot be judges in our own court. We proceeded to court. Nana Akufo-Addo arrested the situation in 2012 when our supporters were becoming unruly just after the elections. Nana Akufo-Addo, Jacob Echebilante, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, Adio Braspo. Nana told the supporters that we've given instructions to our lawyers to go through the pink sheet and we will proceed to court because in our laws, that is the best place for us to seek redress. And unquote. Akufo-Addo did not allow his supporters to embark on daily protest after that speech at Obrasport. And that timely intervention of the leader to call his supporters to order, this was just a day or so after the declaration. And so the supporters then decided to look up to the court. We spent 8 months at the court.
But that was your approach, at least.
Yeah,
we know
but that is the civil approach.
But that
is the democratic approach, not just our approach.
Lost its right to protest.
No, they've lost the right to protest if you do not conform to the laws. We have a Public Order Act.
It's part of the processes and the redress for them, and they feel that being on the streets is part of the options available to them.
But where your right ends, that's where mine begins. But MFI, if you are telling me that there should be complete disregard for our laws, where the Public Order Act should be completely...
Is saying there should be complete
but you're saying that is their right. Their right to protest is enshrined.
Back then when you protested, before that speech that you talk about, did you go by the Public Order Act?
And that is why the presidential candidates at that time decided to put a stop to it.
People were attacked.
Where?
You recall that people were attacked, media people were attacked, ordinary Ghanaians were attacked in the process.
It took leadership of the NPP, led by the presidential candidate, when his attention was drawn to it, to quickly address our supporters and say, look, that is not the way to go.
That's your expectation from the NDC.
And that has been our expectation right from day one. When the results were announced, it is normal that you have supporters who are so expectant that their candidate was going to win. It didn't end up that way for them. They become emotional. They jump on the street. They become unruly. But that should not go beyond 48 hours.
And that was MFR Power engaging MPP national organizer Sammi Awuku on the protest that has ensued since the December 7 election. The second part will be aired tomorrow, 25th December. Stay on the JoyNews channel for all of that.